Welcome, everyone, to episode 347 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentellaresco. I write this up in podcast 2, and today we are back with story time. But this time, we have evolved the concept. I am going to conclude level 1-1 today. The Cloud Diver. Will Johnny and this mysterious girl for Gunblade escape the giant? And furthermore, where do we go from here now that it's gone? This one was very fun for me to record. Johnny is so much fun. He's such a coward, and I had a real blast with this. On the flip side, though, we are evolving this a little bit. I'm not the only one reading today. My first guest is doing this for the very first time, and that's Rae Neale. I've been friends with Rachel for actually a couple of years now. I am an unofficial member of the Kelowna writing crew. Somehow all those guys seem to like me for some reason, and Rachel's impressive. She's been developing her confidence, and she's gotten better, and I've read the book that she's actually presenting, and it's really, really good. And this is her first audio read, and every week now there will be a guest doing something on this show. This week is Rae Neale. Next week is Heather Chambers. The week after is Bobby Nash. I'm going to say who the fourth person is as a surprise, but this is going to show you just exactly what this can go and what this can become. And I decided that this would be a great platform. Like I said when I started this idea, C.S. Lewis is definitely an inspiration, and what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to turn everybody I can into their own C.S. Lewis, and I thank Rachel very much for taking the time to read her story. So we'll get to that. But first, does Johnny and Gunblade make it out? Find out next.
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
Level 1-1, Chapter 7, Feed Void Life. At Void Life. Void Life Verified. One of the big influences for the vision of our company is the late, great Isaac Asimov. Celebrate his life here. Link presented. The whole place zoomed behind me like a blur. My heart palpitated. My legs roared, returning to jelly at the thought of the giant behind me. The sheer adrenaline empowered me to escape him. I wasn't cut out for this sort of thing. Why did I push that button? This whole adventure thing really seems to come with certain death attached to it. I didn't want an adventure that was going to kill me. The now wide-awake giant growled behind me, and my hair stood up on the back of my neck. I was lost in this place and frantically looking for a way out of here. Why did you send me here? I screeched to my little gnome, who was now flapping his little wings as hard as he could. He looked like a cardinal, with white stripes instead of black, and seemed able to keep up with me with ease. It seemed like a good idea at the time, he said. A one-eyed giant is chasing me with a giant spear, and you thought this was better than a chick? I didn't see a giant, he confessed. He was invisible when he was sleeping. How can he be invisible? This place's language is different, Stevie Y frowned. Ancient. Invisible because he couldn't read the language here? Perfect. Death by illiteracy. You were dead with the redhead. I'm still dead with the bronze giant, I exclaimed as best I could, quickly losing breath as I ran. I could feel him coming towards me like a hurricane. I didn't want to be in the vicinity of anything that furious and large after his slumber was disturbed. But where could I go? This place wasn't mapped at all. There was no system here, nothing but an endless sea of frantic connections and abandoned domains. We had to make another door out of this place. You can't run forever, the giant bellowed. Give back what you have taken. I had one fatal moment where I nearly stopped running as confusion reigned on my head. The love letter? He wanted the love letter? Why did he care about someone named Michael? Was he Michael? I dodged a swipe from his spear, thankful for the swooshing sound where I had been a second before. Okay, think, Johnny. What can you possibly do to escape a one-eyed bronze statue? Certain skewering inspired me to consider options that I couldn't do, like fight or develop superpowers. But none of these thoughts resolved the present matter at hand. I was not equipped to fight this thing. But maybe She was. I don't like that look in your eyes, Stevie Y said. Look? The look that says you have an idea. What's wrong with my ideas? They're terrible. What's so terrible about going back to her for help? Do you really have to ask? As it turned out, Stevie Y didn't have to worry about figuring out how to find her. I felt the heat of a bullet whiz right by my temple. It knocked me back slightly as I felt the trickle of liquid wash down my face. Red droplets dribbled to the ground. Blood. That meant harm was possible. She wasn't lying to me about that much, at least. I didn't want to know how much was possible. Her jaw dropped as I charged right past her. She dodged me as I kept barreling forward. It wasn't long before she joined our retreating party, matching our pace with ease. I should have killed you, she growled. This way. She was helping me? I'm not helping you, she stated, as if my mind was an open book for her to read. I just don't have time for you at the moment. That, she waved at the general direction of the giant, is the security protocol I wanted to avoid when I came in here. We need to get out of here first. I'll deal with you later. The drop in her voice that deal with you later didn't exactly exude confidence. I couldn't believe this situation had come about because I grabbed an innocent love letter. The giant, oh please, please, don't let him be Michael. Trying to kill me seemed that extreme for me touching something like that. Keep up if you can, she said, increasing her speed beyond what I thought possible. I followed her, hoping there was an exit nearby. Level 1-1, Chapter 8. Feed Void Life. Void Life, at Void Life. Void Life verified, at Edge of Reason. We are working on fixing our patch errors. Please stand by. If there's one thing I don't like about virtual systems, it's the stamina meter. I mean, we don't breathe air in this system. If you really want to be technical, we breathe nothing. You had us panting and wheezing and thinking about dropping dead as we went through a maze of corridors. Why did they want to make everything so real? Rooms came and went like a blur as we fled our pursuer. I saw a room with boxes tumbling and files scattered everywhere, and I saw a print room churning out spam bots like Candace. Each one looked like a Barbie model, enticing you to buy. Stevie Y whistled in appreciation before I dragged them past the room. Some rooms were more developed than others. One of them was literally a hole in the wall. Another had a whiteboard with code that said up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, select start, whatever that means. Each room was a world unto itself. The system was nothing like how the pristine tower I called my office functioned in the slightest. It was more of an ecosystem, a messy one. We're coming to the chasm, she said, without panic or any sign of slowing down. Chasm? Jump in. Wait, what? I'd rather do a lot of other things than jump in a chasm. Sleeping comes to mind. And then I saw it. It was as wide as a canyon and deep was one, too. I couldn't see the bottom. What do you mean, jump? I finally said aloud. Here, she tossed me a cube and I grabbed it. It was similar to the cube I saw in the library. Press it like this. She squeezed it and a light came on. Without saying another word, she dove into the chasm, leaving me dumbfounded and wondering what the heck was going on. How did I know she wasn't going to try and murder me with the suicide jump? He's coming, Stevie Y said. Somehow, the bronze nemesis had become scarier. He was no longer naked or wielding a spear of justice. Now he was in Vanta black armor and carrying a twisted bone club. It was so jagged I thought I'd be more likely skewered on it than bludgeoned. I squeezed the cube in my hand as hard as I could and jumped. It had to be better than being a shish kebab. Time slowed. I was gliding down the chasm more so than falling. My descent became more and more like a snail's pace, and I felt like I was being gently lowered rather than falling into another level of the cloud. The system itself seemed to alter in my descent, kind of like I was shedding skin. My mind seemed to fade in and out. Just when I thought about where these bits and pieces of myself disappeared to, I was restored and mostly back to normal. The icky feeling returned to me when I reached the bottom. I was back in the room when I first arrived, and she held me at gunpoint. She awaited me at the bottom with her arms crossed while she shook her head and muttered something to myself. Thanks, I said. Don't thank me, she growled. I need you. Rather, your daemon. Me? Stevie Y asked. Why? Thanks to your Maneuver, she growled. You woke some of the cloud's security features. My blade here, she waved it to emphasize the point, can no longer open the door out of the system. Your daemon might be able to get both of us out of here. Might? I asked. It occurred to me that maybe I would never be able to get out of the system. I have to admit that I didn't take it very well. I started wailing. Can I slap him? Gunblade asked Stevie Y. Go for it, Stevie Y shrugged. It'll build character. Okay, I said, recoiling at the very idea of being slapped. I just never expected any of this. Me neither, she admitted, but we have to make do. Now, let's go. Coming to the server from the previous server will slow the giant down, but... Give it back! The giant was falling now, but with much greater velocity than we had. Much like us, though, he seemed to be in complete control of his descent. We only had seconds before he'd be on us. Literally. Clever system, the girl said. I guess we need to get running. She gestured to the daemon. Can you get us out of here? Probably, Stevie Y said. The system is archaic, but some commands are the same. I should be able to create some sort of exit. Can you do anything? She gestured at me with her blade. What do you mean, anything? I didn't fight. I had some hacking tools and knowledge. I could do some things, I was sure. But fight a bronze statue and invent a black arter? No chance. This was well beyond my pay grade. I lowered my head. I can't believe you're so ill-prepared for this place. She sighed. Keep ahead of us. Useless is a terrible word, and yet that was my prevailing mindset as I nodded and ran with them. Level 1-1, Chapter 9. Account, feed, Void Life. At Void Life. Void Life verified. Retweeted by Gordon Bender. Our glorious neuroship at G. Bender CEO on feeding the downtrodden in the ancient metropolis and the challenges therein. Read here. Link provided. We now were at the wall we had originally entered through, and Stevie Y was working on the door. Gunblade had her gunblade pointing towards the incoming giant. Stevie Y didn't need a lot of time, but we had to create a doorway. Get ready, she said. She twirled her gunblade and shifted, becoming something larger and more devastating. Now she carried a wide barrel that fired pure destruction from her shoulder. She went down to one knee and was grinning like an idiot. She seemed to revel in the challenge in front of her. A challenge that was answered with a roaring, library-shaking howl. With a grin that didn't quite touch her eyes, she fired. A sonic boom tore a gaping hole in the middle of the giant's stomach. Blood and intestines oozed out in incomplete bits and pieces. The giant toppled and fell, rolling as it came to a fatal end. I sighed with relief as he lay there, unmoving. Relief only lasted a fraction of a second. Her grin had disappeared and was replaced with concern. How long? She asked. 40 seconds, Stevie Y answered. He was already shifting into the red and white key that had opened the place. Still, 40 seconds wasn't that long a wait. How bad could it be? From how Gunblade groaned, it was terrible. I realized just how terrible it was as the hole in the giant's stomach closed far quicker than it should for someone who was hit with a sonic boom. The armor transferred from a gold to blinding chrome. Calibrating. The giant's voice wasn't the gravel thunder I heard chasing me through the library. It now sounded more like machines of old, cold and inhuman. It marched toward us, wielding death in its hands. I'm out of tricks, she admitted. So it's up to me now. Wonderful. What could I do? I had no weapons and nowhere else to run. That useless feeling boiled back to the surface. What could I do against a giant bone club wielding monster from another time? I can give it back to you, I offered. Give it back? Unbelievably, I had his attention. I was sincere, too. No love letter was worth my life, especially not one addressed to someone else. You are not giving it back, the red-headed woman glared at me. Was the letter for you? I didn't know a red-headed woman named Michael. Then again, she could be trans. What letter? She asked. I suddenly realized I wasn't the only one that had collected a file from this place. Only she didn't want to give hers back. What did she have exactly? If you give it to me, I will let you go. Sure, I said. I had enough adventure for one day. I wanted to go back to the tower. Wait. Pure surprise resonated from her voice. What kind of letter? Just a love letter, I admitted. Love letter? Really? She laughed, and it was beautiful. There was something musical about her voice. For just a moment, I forgot about her hardness and the time she had threatened to kill me. There was a human being somewhere inside her. You are unbelievable. She smiled. But your lover isn't what woke this thing up. No. It was this. She presented from under her sleeve a black envelope. Immediately, all curiosity and hesitation vanished from the giant. The bone club grew much larger, and now the golden armor blazed. I heard a roar that was part animal, part machine. Once again, it was a killing machine bent on our destruction. Done, said Stevie Y in my head. The door I'd walked through into here appeared again behind us. Without saying another word, Gunblade pushed her file into my chest and kicked me. The blow locked Stevie Y and me through the door, landing us on the outside of the library. We watched her fire at the giant as she shut the door. Our last view of the battle was the killing machine swinging down with the immense, couldn't possibly miss bone club to try and finish her off. The door closed. We heard a crunch of what had to be bone meeting club meeting bone, and even though we never saw it land, we knew. Sorrow passed through us as we both lowered our heads and had a moment of silence. Yeah, she had tried to kill me, but she also made sure we got out of there alive. No one deserves to die like that. The library contorted into the shape of the club. It seemed to absorb the blow like butter, but we knew what that signified. The giant was trying to get out of its home. Neither of us needed any more encouragement. We bolted to the elevator as fast as we could. Stevie Y shrunk down and lodged himself in my pocket. As I rushed back to the library without looking back, I was afraid of what I might see if I did. I ignored my concerns about the dark, unfinished abyss around me. All I knew for sure was that the elevator couldn't come soon enough. The door remained open through all this somehow. I wasn't in the mood to guess all the hows and whys. I just darted into the quaint little door and pressed the lobby button, grateful that it closed with no more giants, no more adventure. The buttons inside the elevator had returned to normal. There were 2 8th floors and no 13th floor between 12 and 14. I could go back to being a boring diver in a boring tower and be content. I would never see that girl again or deal with the giant or the library world I journeyed through. I had so much to report to my superiors, and my fellow divers would salivate examining an ancient system. Not me, though. I was done. Except there was this black tome she'd handed me in the cloud, still in my hand. I escaped with my life, and all for whatever this was. What was so important that I had to get out no matter what? Opening the tome, I wish it had been something like a love letter. Love letters didn't have words like hemagglutinin and neuromynides. I didn't know exactly what kind of virus this was, but I could tell that it was nasty and dangerous. What had she wanted with this? Congratulations, you have completed level 1-1. Stay tuned for level 1-2. And that was the end of Chapter 1, or Level 1-1, as the story progresses. And, yeah, like, I was really, really touched. When I first pitched this idea, I was wondering if anyone would actually want to do this. And it turns out I got plenty of people wanting to do this. And not just in Canada, but all over the world. And, but I wanted to start in Canada. So, the book is The Toll of Everdoor. I read, I think, a version of this, and it's really, really fun. It's a solid, it's a very good tale. I actually, I'm curious what she's done with it since I read it, and this is as much a fun for me as it is for her. This is her reading time, and anyway, I've said a lot of nice things. I loved the recording. Rachel has a very silky voice. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to her read it. I think you guys will too. So, without further ado, this is Rae Neale and The Toll of Everdoor.
Hello, world. My name is Rae Neale, and I'm going to be reading to you from my upcoming novel titled The Toll of Everdoor. It follows the adventures of a beast hunter who is hired to kill a dragon. She's hired by her former lover, who is now the queen of the homeland that she has been avoiding for 20 years. My main character's name is Neith, and this reading is from her point of view. Chapter 1. The head in the burlap sack rolled back and forth on the boat headed for the Windy Ale. At the back of the boat, Neath huddled against the cold evening gales of the drowned channel. Howling winds scratched at her blood-smeared breastplate, attempting to piss her off. She drew the hood of her leather cloak over her ears and unsheathed a dagger from her belt to hack at an apple. The boatman glanced over his shoulder and shivered at the sight of her. 6 feet of rusted armor, matted hair the color of flaxseed, and wind-chapped cheeks. His gaze settled on the bloodied sword resting on the stern next to her. She hadn't bothered to clean it. The head knocked against her boots as she sliced into the apple. She gave the sack a little tap, and it rolled to the other side of the boat with a disturbing crunch. It slopped against the back of the boatman's heel. "Will you secure your cargo, traveler?" he said, nearly dropping his oar. She spoke between mouthfuls of apple. "It's not cargo, it's proof." "Of what?" "The beast I killed this morning." A mortified expression fell across his face. "What did you say your name was?" "I said I would pay you double if you got me to the Windy Ale in thunder speed." His oar slapped the water at a leisurely pace. You must be her," he said. "Who?" "The hunter." She grinned. "Most folk with common sense call me the beast hunter." She winked, wickedly. "Not to worry, I only hunt beasts." The head rolled back to her and she swept it up. Blood soaked the burlap. She plunked it on her lap and continued cutting at the apple, stuffing more than one piece in her mouth and inhaling them both at once. The boatman stared at her lap, his face washed in a gray, sickly hue. The sack dripped brain fragments down her leg, drenching her boot in mucus and making the wooden floorboards a slippery mess. She flicked off a slab of brain, tossing it over the edge. "No need to feel bad for the gutter," she said. "It terrorized an entire ogre village for a fortnight before those proud bastards hired me. Ogres like to take care of their own, you see." He cringed and turned to head to the unfriendly bite of the wind, thrashing at open water and his hunched body. In the foreseeable distance, a 2-story building on rafters drifted into view. It was a tired yellow house with a deck wrapped around it like an old rickety lover, and rows of open shutters flickering with light and laughter. The Windy Ale happened to be a tavern boat, which resided on the drowned channel, the body of water separating the near from the far. Every night it settled in a different location on the black, lazy water. Only those who frequented it knew how to find it, because they knew how to look. The boatman paddled faster, and soon enough the mass of his boat slid against the narrow dock attached to the Windy Ale. "Here we are," he called out. "The Windy Ale." The doors to the main tavern hall swung open and a pair of regulars toppled out. Waves of music and debauchery sang to her. Rowdy singing, drunken balls, and a heady amount of smoke overwhelmed her senses. She could already taste the creamy froth of Misty's finest ale hitting her palate. It felt good to be home. She snatched the head and leapt off the boat. "Thanks for the lift," she hollered over her shoulder. "Not so fast," the boatman said. He held out his palm. "Your toll. Double." She grimaced. Being the one and only beast hunter of the lands was a heroic gig and all, but it was far from lucrative. She had been banking on the boatman, fearing her too much to make her pay up. She jiggled around in her coin pouch. One chunk of gold the size of her pinky and one piece of leathery lint. Her last chunk of gold from her last hunt, the chunk she planned to spend on a fine pint of ale to nurse for the remainder of the night. She placed the gold in his wanting palm, reluctant to give it up.
He tossed it in his coat pocket. Hardly double. That's all I have, you beast hunter bigot, she said. Count the rest as payment for the hour I suffered under your disdainful glares. She pushed the dock off with her boot. Naturally, the two regulars got cozy with her. Jerry and Finn, an ogre couple who owned a tree plantation on the edge of Eadspell and Southware. If it ain't the famous beast hunter, back from a haul, Finn said. Misty's been asking on about you, wanting to know if you're still alive. She winked. I always show up, don't I, boys? Aye, Jerry said. It's good to see you, Neath. He pointed at the burlap sack. What in the lands is that? She lifted it, and they both recoiled in disgust. The head of a mangy shishka, she said. A shishka? It's a mix between a wolf and a gargoyle. Half stone, half wild animal. They like to turn children into statues. Of course they do. Finn wiped his brow. I don't know how you keep saying, Neath, chasing around beasts all day. She shrugged. It pays the bills. Most of her bills were debts to others. She slung the sack over her shoulder and ducked into the dim ruckus of the windy ale. The pews and tables slanted indefinitely to the left of the hall, where barrels of cider, ale, and wine weighed the tavern down. Misty, her oldest friend, perched behind a counter teeming with stools and groggy drunks. In one of the more dimly lit booths in the corner, a gaggle of crude ogres tossed back pints of Misty's finest. The Windy Ale, a tavern at an inn, crawled with magic folks, general ruckus, and travelers all hours of the night. It belonged to Misty, a higress who took Neath in after she ran away from home at 15. He was the only tavern in the near and far that embraced both high folk and lesser folk. In the near, lesser folk were those who lived in the far and had no connection to magic. Neath happened to be lesser, who enjoyed the company of those descended from a mill, the goddess who brought magic to the lands and dwelt inside the planet. Misty shot Neath a fond smile. A drunk at the bar leaned into his friend and whispered something that tickled Neath's ear. It looks like she's back to cause trouble. Heading for the ogre's table, Neath's confident stride caught sidelong gazes from ogres, wizards, and fairies, the usual patrons of the Windy Ale. She had yet to be paid by Greg for her latest hunt. His family owned half the village in Southware. Not her favorite ogre of the lands, but he owed her, and she never backed down from a payday, even if the ogre who owed her happened to be 3 times her girth and twice her height. Clapping Greg on the back of the neck, she said, Just the fellow I wanted to see. She slung the grotesque sack on the table, ramming it down on Greg's half-drunk pint. Blood and ale slopped all over his lap. This belongs to you, she said. Greg flew out of his pew in a dramatic show of rotten teeth and curses. He wiped the liquid and brains from his tunic and flicked the unwanted staff at her breastplate. Stuff. His massive form overshadowed her. It does? The tavern went quiet. She challenged his menacing shadow with a step in. That head belonged to the Shishka tormenting one of your father's villages. The old man hired me. Said you would pay up. Greg snarled. Did he? I said he did. I just said it. I didn't see you kill the beast. How do I know it wasn't someone else who killed it and you're taking the glory? She scoffed. I'm the only beast hunter in the lands, and apparently the only one who knows what a shishka is. He shrugged. Come on, Greg. You don't want to test me. Not straight after a kill. Not while I still have adrenaline coursing through me. Tell you what, Neath. How about you get our table another round off Misty, your pal, and leave the hunting and fighting to the men? Then I'll pay up. A sack of gold hung from his belt, tempting her. Not tonight, Greg, she said. He bent over, shoving his massive head toward hers, his blue lips curling back and filling her airspace with the smell of raw fish. He spat at her feet. Under all that armor, all you are is a prissy with tiny tits. Get out of my way. Greg. The ogre she had always wanted to punch and always refrained from punching. She rarely liked to punch ogres, especially because they were some of her best clientele. Ogres paid in bricks of gold and favors, and a favor from an ogre could get you a kingdom. But Greg had it coming, and tonight she was too fresh from killing a shishka to be wise. She stepped on his wad of spit, smeared it around with her boot, and leaned into his line of vision. What did you call me? To lean into an ogre's vision was to ask for a brawl. They hated eye contact. His bulgy pupils steeled. I said, her fist smashed into his cheek, making her knuckles crunch against the inside of a rusted gauntlet as his face flattened. Spit and blood splattered her breastplate in an untoward manner. She howled. Mighty lands, Greg! Is your face made of steel? He splattered out 4 teeth as if they were kernels of corn. His wide, bloody grin came at her, and she ducked from his counter-swing. She slammed her shoulder into his gut, forcing him to keel backward with the weight of his torso. He oofed and stumbled, giving her just enough time to rip off her gauntlet and survey the damage. Her wrist shook like a leaf in a violent storm. Skin peeled from her knuckles to the tips of her fingers, dangling like damp licks of tongue. She flicked her wrist to cool the pain and cursed her tendency to fight masses 3 times her size. But she'd taken on the likes of far worse than a chubby, cranky regular at Windy Ale. A crowd circled her, shoving her with their goblets and waving coin purses around like baboons, betting on who would win and who would fall. A crude lot at best. Most of them wagered on her losing to Greg, bragging about Greg's size while noting her tired eyes and the shape she was in. Those who had hired her in the past chuckled, their eyes twinkling with the knowledge of her ruthless ways. They slapped their gold chunks on the bar top in favor of her and held back from the crowd, arms crossed and smiling with ease. Misty, however, relaxed behind the bar with his ale in hand, his gray hair slicked back and his apron frumpy from a hard day's work. They had been friends for 20 years. Like usual, he declined to wager over her victory or defeat. In a show of terrible sportsmanship which got the crowd chanting her name, Neith ripped off her other gauntlet and threw it at Greg's massive belly. It hit the sticky floorboards with a clank. He growled and charged, arms swinging, face distorted with rage. She swiveled to his right and grabbed hold of his ankle, then yanked. He hit the ground, still swinging, and knocked himself good in the chin. The crowd exploded with laughter. Wasting no time, she gripped a handful of his flimsy braid, jerking his head upright. Give up, Greg. Apologize for calling me a prissy and withholding my rightful paycheck, and I promise to spare your wife and the Wheelets. Her threat was met with a bloody mouthful of curses on her soon-to-be grave. You little... She yanked his braid and slammed down. Oof! His face broke the floorboard, or maybe it was the other way around. Either way, the awful crack made the crowd gasp. That ain't fair, someone yelled. She's got him pinned on all four. Nothing's fair when it comes to Neith, one of the gents who wagered on her yelled in return. She's as ruthless as a dragon gone to war, she is. I've seen her with my own. Greg got a hold of her leg and ripped off his back. In a blink, he had her hanging upside down. He chortled as he shook out her pockets, and her belongings clattered to the floor. A few hidden daggers, lint, and a gold locket on a chain. "Ooh, treasure," Greg exclaimed. She hammered her fists at both sides of his obtrusive belly, grunting and protesting the theft of her hard-earned living. Greg scooped up the locket, chuckling with a gap-toothed grin, and tucked it into his belt. He addressed the crowd. "Is this your famous beast hunter?" She veered her free leg into action, aiming for his exposed windpipe, but he caught her with both ankles and swung her around in a circle before throwing her at a vacant line of tables. She hit a corner of one with a quick stab to the back, then flew against a pew and broke it in two. "Now you have it coming," Misty howled from behind the bar. "That table and pew go on your tab, Greg." Greg grunted. Neith rose from the splinters, her back and shoulders tight from the crash. Misty tolerated her forte for causing havoc and drawing bad blood with regulars like a bad omen. This wasn't the first time she had made a mess of his tavern, and it wouldn't be the last. She owed him big time. Greg looked ready to crush a rat with one finger. She picked up a broken table leg. He jingled the gold locket and snatched a goblet from the nearest drunkard, spilling the contents of ale at his feet. Misty slammed his fists on the bar. "No weapons!" he yelled. And that concludes the reading from Chapter 1. Thank you for listening. I enjoyed very much sharing with you my novel about Neith and her escapades. For more readings and updates on upcoming novels and revisions, you can find me on Instagram. My username is Rae Neale _author, or you can find me on www.raeneale.weebly.com. And I keep a blog on that website as well, just to keep you in the loop about what's going on. And I also write just little updates or articles on what I'm feeling about the world, on travels, on creativity. So you can check that out. Give me a follow on Instagram, and I would love to follow you back. Have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
And that was Rae Neale. I'm going to leave a link to her so you can go and comment to her. Tell her how great she was, because she was awesome. And it was a great, great debut for this. Like I said, every week is going to be someone a little different. Next week, it's going to be Heather Chambers reading from her book Earth Sucks, which is actually a very entertaining book. I really enjoyed reading it myself, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to her, another debut. And then the following week will be Bobby Nash. Bobby's a future guest for this show. As well. Heather is going to be on this week's episode. That's kind of why Heather is going to be, she's actually going to be 349 and 350, just based on the luck of this. Yeah, I really am digging this idea, and I love that people are getting involved. So to everybody that so far has said yes and has delivered, thank you very, very much. Man, we got some fun interviews coming this week at as I keep going through CanCon. We've crossed the halfway barrier this week. And then then we go downhill. Like, we got another 2.5 weeks of CanCon interviews, and then we flash forward to my first interview from Vancouver, with the great Sister C. We're coming to the point now where I get into new territory, and I finally get through the rest of my 2019 interviews. All in all, I'm really digging this format, and I hope you guys are too. And that'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. So if you want to support the podcast, you can do so in a number of different ways. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find me on Podomatic and virtually every other player. Click the subscribe button, share it, let people know what's going on. There's some, like I said, I have had guests from newcomers to people like Charles DeLent and everybody in between you can imagine. This definitely was a lot of fun to do. Mirror World Publishing has a special right now. You can definitely get my books real cheap there. Go to mirrorworldpublishing.com for details. If you want to support me financially, my merchandise is jpentelleresco.redbubble.com. I have t-shirts for just joshing. I have a fun one called Sparkle Sparkle, which actually does tie into the Cloud Diver, believe it or not. And then I'm on YouTube as Joshua Pentelleresco. My 299 previous episodes are there. Outside of that, let me think here. My Twitter and Instagram is at jpentelleresco. My Facebook page is Joshua Pentelleresco, author podcaster. Stay tuned for episode updates and guides. Stay inspired out there. And I'll see you guys next week we start level 2-1. Anyways, take care, guys.
Josh.